Hello teacher, classmates, and everyone watching this video. Our names are Paola Figueroa, Rodrigo Lopez, and Maria Gracia Bravo, and we are going to talk about a branch of psycholinguistics called language acquisition. We're also going to talk about related contents like theories and stages of this process. As a short introduction, there are some key contents that could be useful to understand the upcoming presentation, like psycholinguistics, which is the study of the relationships between cognition and language acquisition itself, which is the process in which a person obtains the capability to perceive a language acquisition theories, which are theories provided to explain the way in which human beings learn the language and recognize it, cognitive, which is the faculty of human beings to process information from perception. What are psycholinguistics and how they could be defined? To begin with, and as its name says, psycholinguistics are a science that combines psychology and linguistics, and it can be defined as the study of language and the mind, and be labeled as cognitive linguistics. These definitions are given to this discipline because it explores the relationships between linguistics, behaviors, and psychological processes, including language acquisition being very important to the array of this last topic. This study is also responsible of finding out about the different structures and processes which underlies a human's ability to speak and understand a language. And it also examines language as a product of the human's mind and such as evidence at the way in which human beings organize their thoughts and impose patterns. Language is a major area of psycholinguistics. First of all, language acquisition refers to the processes of acquiring a native or a second language. And this is one of the major areas that psycholinguistics studies, in consequence of being one of the three main points of the study of psycholinguistics. According to this, psycholinguistics are responsible for providing numerous theories to explain how a person acquires a language, and this process is called psycholinguistic approach.
And the next stage is language acquisition. So this process is a process by which humans acquire the capacity to perceive and comprehend language, as well as use and produce words and sentences to communicate. We say this because non-humans, such as objects, animals, and plants, cannot communicate each other as well as humans. This process usually refers to a first language acquisition because the second language acquisition is more complex and has more factors, such as if the person is learning a second language as well as a first language, if it's bilingual, and many more. Which theories of language do we have? And we have 4, but for this class we're just looking 2 because are the most important and have more evidence. The first theory is by Chomsky. He says that language acquisition is a process biologically determined. He says that our brain, since we are born, has a determined way to learn language. It's something that we're born with. And this faculty is also called as language acquisition advice, or LIG, and all human languages share common principles. For example, if we compare English, Spanish, French, or Italian in other languages, we can see that all share nouns, verbs, pronouns, adjectives, and are very similar in a grammatical way. So as I said, there's evidence that support this theory, and I have 4, but I will say the most important, I think. Well, first, Slavin says that human anatomy is prickly adapt. Through years, for example, we developed the vocal cords, we developed the mouth, the lips, and other things. The Creole is an evidence very clearly that he says that Creole varieties of English seems to be a result of LID work because the humans have the capacity and necessity to speak, and that's why we create Pidgin language and other languages. And for Eli Lennenberg, he says that humans are predisposed, in his book, to acquire language in the same way that behaviors emerge in other species. For example, a human can speak as a bird can fly, or as a turtle can swim, or as a cat can see. It's something very natural, and we born with that. The Piaget theory is a cognitive one. He says that we move through very four stages while we develop our cognitive cognition. So, for example, concepts require understanding. If I would like to use the future tense, I have to understand that something is going to happen. But for a new child, he can barely understand where he is. And now we're looking for the different stages. Well, we have four, as I said, and the last one, which I am, I can say that a glass is empty or full, or is half and half. But as I said, a newborn can barely understand what is that, if that's a glass or something to entertain, or anything. If we can put this into a transcript, to theory, for example, a mom talking to his daughter, his daughter says that he did races, and Ellie won, but she did it in the fastest way. If we look at this, we can say that Robin is clearly at the pre-operational stage because he can dominate the past tense using we did, or Robbie did, or Ellie won. She also shows an appreciation of the superlative adjective using best.
So, how can we apply what we learned today at the stages of first language acquisition? Babies are constructing the view of the world with the language. Their concept of what is valuable in the culture and all these different things are constructed with language. We might think that the reason why children end up sounding native in their languages is because they receive lots of corrections, but there is a lot of linguistic evidence that children don't respond to corrections at all. The way that children learn language is through pattern recognition. They are fed all this input and they are constantly trying to update their model of how the language works by that information. So if they notice a new pattern, they kind of come up with the hypothesis of, oh, maybe the language works this way, and ends up being predictive in terms of allow them to understand more of the language or speak the language better. Then they go with that hypothesis, and if you get disproven, they won't, and so. At any given point in time, a child's understanding of the language is based on all the different sentences that they've heard in the language until that point. And so if you correct a child, you're giving them one piece of counter evidence to their current model, but it's not going to be enough to override all that evidence that they have on their own. One additional sentence, they are really taken in probably hundreds of thousands of sentences and words, really is just the inherent language acquisition device inside of them, that the language of the child brain that eventually arrives at the perfect model given enough data. And there's even more examples of people who grow up not being able to speak because of some kind of birth defect, and later in their life with technology they become able to, and we find that they can write perfectly grammatical speech straight away because they were getting input their entire life by hearing their families and so.
No, you will never be able to communicate. But I loved using my voice, even when I was the only one in the world who could hear it. But autism locked mine inside a body I cannot control. I knew my voice was smart, even though the doctors told my parents I'd never speak. Because I couldn't speak, they thought I didn't have anything to say. Until I found a way for my voice to be heard. It might take me longer, and it might make me have to think outside of the box, but I always accomplish what I set out to. My name is Carly Fleischman, and I'm going to use the power of my voice to become the world's first autistic and nonverbal television talk show host.
And to conclude this presentation, I'm going to talk about some mysteries in the first language acquisition. There is the critical period hypothesis that talks about the children and babies that didn't receive enough input from their parents, or the case of feral children that are children that were completely abandoned, and this lack of input makes that they will only achieve a limited degree of competence. There is no agreement of how long this critical period lasts and when the plasticity of the brain comes to an end, but Lennonberg associated the end of the critical period with adolescence, and there is other researchers that suggested it end at 5 or 9 years old.